Hello, I'm George Takei, and this is my editor, Phoebe Yee,
Hi, George. I am so happy to be here with you.
to talk about my lost freedom.
Indeed. But let's start by asking you to sign the
Oh,
book first.
all right. In gold, no less.
Beautiful.
Here we are, in
Excellent.
gold.
We have been on this journey a couple of years.
Indeed. And I took some years before that to write it.
Well, you know what's amazing to me is you have had such an illustrious career on stage, on screen. You are an activist known worldwide.
I'm buying more.
You know, you wrote your memoir for adults, you wrote a graphic novel, and now for the youngest readers,
Yes.
right? A picture book. So let's start with that. Why did you want to write this book?
Well, I was 5 years old when the soldiers came to our home with rifles with shiny bayonets on them and ordered us out of our home and took us to Santa Anita racetrack, where we went from a 2-bedroom home on Garnet Street in Los Angeles to a horse stall, pungent with the stink of horse manure. My mother kept mumbling, "So humiliating." And I was a 5-year-old and completely confused. And I was kind of happy that we were going to sleep where the horses slept. So I wanted to keep that child's vantage point and contrast that with my parents' sense of degradation. A horse stall from a 2-bedroom home to my childish fun of sleeping where the horses slept. And because of the germs there, insects skittering around on the ground, and flies buzzing in the air, my baby sister promptly got sick. And a few days after that, I got sick too. And how Michelle, our wonderful illustrator, captured that living in a horse stall. And my mother attending to 2 sick children. And my brother, I have a brother a year younger than me, so he was 4, I was 5, and my baby sister was a baby. And here's my mother nursing us.
Now, what's kind of incredible to me is this is something that happened such a long time ago. I don't remember very much from when I was 5. Was it just the shock of being displaced? You know, it's so incredible that, you know, sort of the smells of with your memory and your recall. I mean, that is definitely something our art director, our illustrator, we were just marveling that we could go to you and say, George, you know, describe the stall to us. Describe, you probably remember it. You know, you remembered the color of your mother's sweater. Really small but important details. Let's take a moment though to talk about Michelle. This was a very, you know, first experience. So you wrote the text first, and it's probably a little bit different from the adult book because it was way shorter. You may recall.
Yes,
I kept
indeed.
on sending it back and like, George, less text. We need even less text. We need room for art. And then it was time to choose the artist. Do you remember what was it about Michelle's art that really appealed to you? Was it the way she drew the people? Was it her landscapes?
Well, one thing about, I saw some samples of her other work and I was taken by that. But the other important thing is she lives not too far away from the Japanese American National Museum in Los Angeles, much younger than me. So she didn't have this experience and she needed to do a lot of research, and she didn't want to be calling me up all the time. But even better was a museum where she can get access to photos and other drawings made by children at that time in incarceration, and talk to the curators, the historians, and get all of the details from the museum itself, which I could not provide her, just the child's vantage point. And so that was a big asset, her having access to the museum. And she would call me about the barracks, where the windows were, and how many on one wall and how many on the other wall, all these little details. And I vaguely remember we looked outside, and the natural light came in from two windows on one side, and this other side had one window and a doorway. And so I was able to provide some of those details, but she on her own did a great deal of research, and I have great respect for her integrity as an artist, but also her talent as an artist to capture a point in time that she never experienced, was able to put herself in the place of a 5-year-old Japanese-American boy.
Yeah, I think we loved the way she showed the expressions on little George at age 5, the family members. We found out later she did go to some incarceration camps. She felt that was very important. She had to see it. She made models of the barracks. You're being really modest, but I also remember we did have conversations with you where even though we had maps, we still needed you to take us back, walk us through it. That was a really invaluable part of the bookmaking experience.
Well, at the museum, we have a scale model of the Manzanar camp, which is the camp that she visited. Today, the site is unrecognizable as internment camp. I've made pilgrimages back to the 2 other camps that we were incarcerated in. When we first went to Arkansas, to the Arkansas camp, it was nothing like what's pictured here. This swamp, great big dark ominous trees beyond the barbed wire fence. And then here are the 2 kids, me and Henry, my younger brother, and my baby sister and my mother by the barrack. She was able to see the scale model of Manzanar built by an internee based on his memory and having blueprints of the barracks. And so she was able to see the real thing at the museum built in a scale model. And then we have the ruins of the camp in Wyoming, Hart Mountain. And that's the centerpiece of the internment camp exhibit. You see this barrack, ragged tar paper now, because they tried to erase, the government tried to erase any sign of camp after the war.
Well, see, I think you're raising a really important point, that because we have this picture book, children and their caregivers, the parents, the educators, the librarians, they can all see, right? You were taken to 3 places, and even if they don't exist now, they now exist in the pages of the book.
Absolutely.
And this is part of American history. And I guess my question for you is, it's written for children, but most of them, the adults, will read the story to the children. So you're actually reaching, multiple generations. And
that's what I wanted to do with To the Stars, my autobiography. I was able to reach primarily Star Trek fans, because on the cover I'm in my Starfleet uniform looking up to the cosmos. And with the graphic memoir, I wanted to reach teenagers, because as a teenager I loved comic books, and I thought this is a way to reach teenagers. But with this generation, I reached 2 generations. The parents, Daddy and Mommy, reading to little Johnny and little Janie, So the parents will, reading this to their children, will do a little research on their own so that they can discuss it with their kids. And for the kids, it's their first exposure to this shameful chapter of American history.
Plus, children were incarcerated. So, so sad, and yet it's something children need to know. They need to learn this.
I remember how scary the whole thing. First of all, when soldiers came marching up to our home, carrying rifles with shiny bayonets and with their fists banged on our front door, I remember how scary that was. And so as a child, I remember the terror. And then in camps, we had riots, people dragged out of their barracks in the middle of the night, and the women crying and sobbing, asking the soldiers not to take her husband away. So that I have these memories that are burned into my brain. And I wanted to keep that memory and share it to show what can happen to a country when it's terrorized by war. We're Americans who happen to look just like the people that bombed Pearl Harbor. And only for that reason, we were imprisoned. We had absolutely nothing to do with Pearl Harbor. We were innocent. And yet they categorized us as enemy alien, which we were neither. We weren't the enemy. And certainly I was a child, so we couldn't be the enemy. But my parents were American. My mother was born in Sacramento, California. That's the United States. My father grew up in San Francisco. My grandparents were the immigrant generation. And yet, with no charge in America, we believe in the system of due process. When you're arrested, you have the right to know why you're arrested, a charge. Then you have a right to challenge those charges in a court of law. That all disappeared. They just categorized us as enemy alien. We were neither, and put us into these barbed wire prison camps in some of the most godforsaken places. When we went back in 2004 to see, on a pilgrimage to see where I spent my childhood, I saw nothing of the swamp. It was just cotton fields. And I kept thinking, when are we going to get to the swamps? Because that was the memory I had. And when we got there, it was just cotton fields, torn down the trees and drained the swamp. And now it was cotton fields.
Another memory that you talk about, and it's also referenced in the book, it's about your parents and how at each camp, both parents, they were true heroes. Can you talk a little bit about your father and how he organized the Japanese Americans living? He came up with an idea to try to get people together.
Because, we were all Japanese Americans, but we were all different. Some were shopkeepers, some were dentists. We were all different. And to have all that they had achieved taken away from them for no good reason other than looking like that. There were some people that were bitter, poor me, just
or sad.
Understandably. Then there were others who felt, I don't have to work, they're going to feed me. There were all these different attitudes that people had. And my father felt that you're not going to be able to survive if we're all in our little pockets of despair or anger or enjoying no work. And we had to build a sense of community. And so my father was a baseball player, as you noted, in San Francisco as a young man. And his team played all the other Japanese American teams around San Francisco Bay. It was San Jose, Oakland, Berkeley. He thought that's going to be something that's going to bring people together. And so he suggested building a baseball diamond. We went to cheer for Daddy when he was pitching, or Jack Yamada would playing first base, and all his cousins would come and cheer for Jack. And so that there was that sense of coming together as a community, or negotiated with the camp administrators to borrow a record player once every couple of months. And after dinner, in the mess hall, the tables would be dragged away and the benches would be lined around the wall, and teenagers had their dances. And our barrack was right across from the mess hall. Mother put us to bed, right after dinner. But I remember hearing the big band sounds of Tommy Dorsey and Benny Goodman wafting over the night air from the mess hall when the teenagers had their dances. And so that kept them from getting into trouble. And so all these things that my father had to deal with. Well, my mother's domain was our room, our unit in the barracks. No privacy, tar paper walls. You can hear the neighbor. The windows were there. She got army surplus canvas and made curtains. And she gathered rags, tore them into strips, and braided them into a rug.
So she made it as home-like.
She made it home for us.
And she also made it very beautiful.
She had to find the right,
something that looked aesthetically,
aesthetic,
but really just trying to make a home for your family.
Yeah, and all pictured in this book. That's the wonderful thing about a picture book. Words are fine, and people can imagine it, but here it's wonderful to just flip through this and see what it was like. The horse stalls, the barrack, and the windows.
Yes, this one here, we had hours and hours of conversation about which direction the door faced, where were the windows, and Michelle, she was a trooper. She redid that page.
She's terrific.
Over and over again because it was important to get it right.
And my mother was very gutsy. We were to take only what we could carry. My mother knew that her very young children are going to be growing it and needing new set of clothes as they grew. And so she smuggled in this sewing machine, portable sewing machine. She wrapped it in a wooden case, and she wrapped it in baby blankets and sweaters and so forth. But she smuggled in, marched past all the armed soldiers with contraband.
Love it. Your mom's a rebel. That was when you were in Arkansas. When you were in California, am I right in that was that the first time you saw your first movie?
Yes.
One of the first times? And did that maybe fast forward years later, you had the idea that you wanted to be an actor?
I was still young, and being fascinated by so many other things. And one thing unique about the movies we saw in Tule Lake, the third camp that we were sent to in Northern California, and they were mostly Hollywood movies, old movies, George Raft gangster movies, and things like that. But occasionally we get samurai movies, and they seem to have lost the soundtrack for them. They were all silent. Together with the samurai movies came a gentleman who had memorized the script apparently, but he also had a script in front of him. He set up a table and with a little light, coconut shells to replicate the sound of horses, and an iron triangle with a pipe to create the sound of sword fighting. And there was a young man next to him to make those sounds. But that man had the dialogue and lip sync some of the actors. And so he played the shogun as well as the samurai, as well as the princess.
So all the parts.
All those voices. And I was more fascinated by him at the lower edge than by the picture on the screen. The Lord would go And the samurai would go, "Ha, so de gozaimasu." And the princess would go, one man producing all those voices. And so that implanted in me the idea of telling a story with your voice. And he wasn't on the screen at all, just his voice. And my first acting job was dubbing in Japanese sci-fi monster movies into English. This producer had bought the rights to this sci-fi monster movie and wanted to mass release it and dub it into English so that it could be understood by an American audience. And it was such a thrill going to MGM Studios in Culver City to go past that gate and a sound stage with the image of this Japanese film with this flying dinosaur doing the voices of the terrorized people.
See, a star was born. Okay, so fast forward to Star Trek. So many people first know you because of Star Trek. Talk about one of your Star Trek memories and how it also informs what you're trying to do in My Lost Freedom.
Well, in camp in Arkansas was a rural part, so the air was clean, and at night when you looked up, you saw the twinkling stars that looked so close that you could almost scoop them up with your hands. And I remember looking at those night sky and wondering about those twinkling planets, I was told. And little did I know, a few decades later, I would actually be soaring through the galaxies, driving a starship called the Starship Enterprise, with a crew full of Earthlings, all different, just like in camp, all coming together, working as a team. On Star Trek, we said infinite diversity in infinite combinations, working in concert. That's how we boldly go where no one has gone before.
That too, I think, is such a beautiful example of how even when people were incarcerated, there was a way to come together, in large part to people, due to the efforts of people like your father. But then fast forward in later years, I feel like you've taken these examples, right? And your life as an activist. And
well, when I became a teenager, I had those memories, but I wanted to know more about my childhood. And so I had many discussions with my father after dinner about, we call it camp. And my father often quoted from Abraham Lincoln's Gettysburg Address, government of the people, by the people, and for the people. He said those are noble ideals of our democracy, but therein also lies the weakness of our democracy, because people are fallible human beings. People make mistakes. And that's why in a democracy, the people have to take on a citizen's responsibility to keep those ideals fixed and strong and true. He said to his 3 children, be active in school, join clubs, help with projects. And then when I was a teenager, he took me to the Adlai Stevenson for President campaign headquarters and then introduced me to electropolitics. And I saw how our democracy worked. People, senior citizens, gray-haired ladies, as well as gray-haired or bald-headed old men, school kids, people of my parents' generations, all coming together and stuffing envelopes or making phone calls to help get an eloquent man, Adlai Stevenson, governor of Illinois, elected president. It was exciting, it was suspenseful, all the elements of things that make for a theatrically oriented kid. And it was fun, and I enjoyed it. And so I kept on with it, supported someone running for the U.S. Senator from California, or governor of California, or mayor of Los Angeles. I lost with all the other campaigns that I joined. But when I supported Tom Bradley for mayor of Los Angeles, I succeeded.
There you go. There you go. But I'm wondering too, like in writing My Lost Freedom, what is your message to young people?
At every age, you can contribute to making America better. I mean, as a young kid, I did volunteer for the Junior Red Cross. Middle school, I was elected a Junior Red Cross representative to Student Council. And then the next year, I ran for student body president.
But the key thing is you are not too young, right? You're
Absolutely.
not too young to make a
At every
contribution.
age, you can make our democracy work by volunteering, running for office. You are contributing to making our democracy true.
Well, I want to thank you, George, because for me, My Lost Freedom, it's about heroes, it's about courage and
And it's
caring,
about this doggy, Blackie, a
and
stray dog.
who you and Henry gave a home to.
He looked so hungry. He was sniffing around back of the kitchen mess hall. And he looked so hungry that we asked Mr. Yamada, can you spare something for this poor raggedy dog to eat? And he gave us a piece of weenie that he was preparing for dinner that night. And we gave it to him. He just swallowed it immediately within one gulp. I knew that our mother kept a tin of cookies back in our unit. And so we begged some cookies off of her. And that's how Blackie came to be a member of the family. And we built a doghouse for him right underneath our barrack.
So, George, last words for us. Any last words?
Our
out
freedom
there?
is precious and it can be lost. And so I hope the message that gets across to people is we have to actively participate on whatever level to keep our freedom, our ideals of our democracy being true and being American. And I think it's relevant to our times today.
Hear, hear.
Hear, hear. It's happening again. A government of the people, by the people, and for the people, and even for doggies.
Now, it's good to have a reminder.
Yes, indeed.
Thank you, George.
Thank you for publishing this.